Hi everyone, and welcome to the lecture video, Searching for Sources. In this video, we're going to learn about the process of locating good peer-reviewed sources and other reputable research publications. Now, when you want to find research, there are several good places to start your search. Our UT Tyler library is one of the best because you already have online access to most of the article's full text. You can use the swoop search option on the main page to locate books, journal articles, and online media. It's very easy to use, and it can give you access to all of our e-materials through your UT Tyler login, no matter where you're located. Google Scholar is another one of my main go-tos for research because it's easy to use and it's pretty comprehensive. One of the readings this week discusses how to maximize your usage of Google Scholar and library websites through the use of Boolean operators and search terms. Another tip is to use Google Scholar when you're connected to the university's Wi-Fi or on a university computer. That's because the Google search will recognize your library access and will give you quick access to full text when possible through our library's databases. Now, I sometimes use the criminal justice referral service, as it is one of the largest criminal justice libraries in the world, with over 2 million reports, articles, and audiovisual products included in the database. However, one of the main issues with the service is that many of the reports and documents are not available for free. That said, if you find an interesting source, you can copy and paste the title into the swoop search to see if our UT Title library has it online. Worst case, you can use the interlibrary loan, or ILLiad process, to request a copy of the article that's sent to you for free. You should never be stumped by a paywall while you're a student. Typically, interlibrary loan requests can be completed in less than 48 hours for online articles and less than a week for physical books. So as long as you give yourself enough time, meaning don't start looking for sources the night before the papers due, you can get free copies of any source you want with just a few extra clicks. Something specific to criminal justice here at UT Tyler is our criminal justice research guide on the Muntz Library website. Did you know that we have a social science librarian at the Muntz Library? Their job is specifically to help with many of the humanities sciences, including criminal justice, in order to help students with their criminal justice research. So they're a great resource for you to get one-on-one assistance locating good sources and with using the library databases. If you open up the LibGuides website shown here on the screen, you can email our social science librarian directly, request an appointment, or even chat live with them. Lots of ways to get help. No matter what website you use to search for sources, to find good sources, you need to use keywords or terms related to your topic of interest. Sometimes you find that your search terms aren't giving you the right types of sources, or maybe they're giving you way too many or too broad of sources. This is where the Boolean operators comes into place. They can help you narrow down your search so that you can pinpoint publications that are specific to your topic of interest. Did you also know that most journals require the authors to provide 3 to 5 keywords for their research article? So if you find a really good source and you want to find more, you may be able to use the keywords provided by the author as inspiration or for assistance on your quest for additional sources. Now, the most common types of filters that you can access on the library and Google Scholar are restrictions on the date of publication and the type of source. You can see here that Google Scholar has some filter options on the left-hand side of your search. Google Scholar is already limited to academic sources, mainly articles and books, so there isn't too many additional filtering options. The UT Tyler library, however, has multiple filtering options shown under the menu Tweak My Results. You can see here that you can filter by availability, allowing you to select only peer-reviewed sources or those with full text online, and you can also filter by resource type, which allows you to filter out books and audio materials. Now at this point, you've found a bunch of results, but how do you know which ones will be useful for you? The best thing to do is look over the title and the abstract. The abstract will be a paragraph, approximately 200 to 300 words, that should walk you through the entire paper. A good abstract will give you the research purpose, a short description of the methods that were used in the study, what the authors found when they analyzed the data, and why that finding is important. Use the abstract to determine if the subject is relevant to your particular research topic. Maybe it's related through a keyword, but once you read the abstract, you find it's really off topic. So the abstract can help you narrow down your list of things to investigate. When you're reviewing the source, also evaluate the publishing date. Generally, we want sources that are contemporary, meaning they've been written recently. And usually that goes about 5 to 7 years, depending on who's labeling contemporary. And you can even go so far as 10 or 15, and that depends on the type of source and the type of research question. For example, the census data is only released every 10 years, so you may have to go back 10 years to get the data you need. However, don't grab census data from the 1990s. That's too far away from the current time period, and you're unlikely to find the source helpful for contemporary issues. Now, that doesn't mean you should never include older references. Often there are seminal pieces that you need to include, like the person who originally wrote the theory you're using. One of the ways to identify a seminal source is to look at the citation count in Google Scholar. The photographs here show some of the seminal pieces of criminological theory. Notice the citations range in the thousands, even the tens of thousands. This indicates that these pieces, no matter how old they are probably important. However, if you wanted to cite something about the current state of policing, you wouldn't use the source from the 1960s. So you have to be aware of the time period. Okay, so now you've found a source. It's contemporary, the title sounds appropriate for your topic, and you think going through the abstract that it's something you want to read and include in your research paper. Now I'll teach you a trick. The next step is do not read the entire article. I cannot tell you the last time I read a full research article from front to back. As researchers, it's important to think about what you want to get out of the article, and then identify the best place to find that information. In most cases, there is no reason to read the entire journal article. And I want to repeat that because it's super important. There is no reason, usually, to read the entire journal article. So what parts do you actually need to read through? Well, first let's talk about what information each part typically holds. Now, typically there are 7 main parts of a primary research paper. The abstract is the first part. The abstract should contain, like we've talked about, the purpose of the study, the research question, a brief synopsis of the methodology, and the significant findings. This is a priority. Now, typically abstracts are limited to 250 to 300 words in length, and maybe even shorter. So they're quick and they're easy to get through, and if they're well designed, they'll tell you a lot about the study. A quick read of the abstract is the best way to determine if you should continue looking or put the article aside. Next is the introduction. The introduction is usually the first 2 to 3 paragraphs of the actual paper. And the goal of the introduction is to convince the reader that the study is important. So in this section, the author will highlight why we should care about the topic and identify the gap that the paper will fill. For some purposes, this may be important, but oftentimes this can be skimmed or skipped entirely. Next comes the literature review. Because it's not necessarily focused on the study at hand, this isn't usually a section you need to focus on when you're trying to summarize an empirical article. However, the literature review is a great place to find additional papers on the topic. So if you're at the beginning of your search, or if you're having problems finding good sources, this is a good place to look. Next comes the methods section. This explains how the study was done. This is a really important piece for critiquing the study, because this information in this section will allow you to identify how things were measured, what limitations exist, and what choices were made that could be improved. However, that being said, it will depend on the purpose of your summary as to whether or not this is an important section to read. Next are the findings, often labeled results. The results are the numbers, graphs, tables, charts, and diagrams that document the specific findings from the research. Now, usually the results section is technical and it can contain a lot of unknown jargon that may be hard to understand. This section also will lack interpretation and discussions of the broader picture. My recommendation in most cases is to skip the results section entirely, particularly as an undergraduate student. Instead, go to the next section, and that's going to be a great help. During the discussion, or sometimes called the conclusion section, the author will go over the article's significant findings, but they're going to do so without the jargon, and they're going to talk about the significance and the relationship to the broader field. This is also where authors will usually discuss the limitations of the current study and make recommendations about future research. And so that's a great avenue if you're trying to improve on someone's study. They will basically write your justification for you. Finally, the last section is the references section, which will list all of the articles cited within the article. and this section is also a great location to find additional research studies on that topic. The picture here on this slide shows you what sections of the article you should read based on what your goal in the summary is. Now, the important takeaway from this chart is that there is not a single column that requires you to read all 7 sections. When you're summarizing literature, skip to the parts of the article that will help you the most. Sometimes the abstract is all you need. You may also be able to review the discussion section to get what you need. And other times you may need to go deeper into the methodology or into the results section. The type of focused reading will help you improve your searches because you won't waste valuable time reading sections that don't apply or that you don't have the technical knowledge to understand or critique. All right, so at this point, you've done your search for sources through the library or through Google Scholar or another website. You've reviewed the abstract and the title, and maybe you've gone and read further in the article depending on your purpose in reading it. There are a few other considerations that you might want to look into before using the paper in your research paper. To be honest, a lot of times these steps aren't followed, but they are an important part of being a critical consumer. And this is particularly true when you find an article that seems unusual or kind of out of the box compared to other research or ideas that you've read. First, something to consider is who is the author? What makes them an expert in their subject? If funding is provided for the research study, the author should acknowledge that on the front page of the manuscript. Now, ideally, regardless of the funder, the research should be objective, but be aware. For instance, let's say I find an article that proposes drinking diet soda will lower my blood pressure and increase my lifespan. That's a little bit fishy, right? Most sources talk about avoiding sodas altogether, so I decided to dig deeper into it. I look up the article and I find out that the author is a licensed medical doctor who works for a major university. Okay, seems logical so far. But then in the paper, I find an acknowledgement of funding stating that the author received funding from a major soda corporation for this research. Are you more suspicious now? Because I definitely am. Now, again, that funding acknowledgement makes me suspicious, but it doesn't mean that the research findings are completely false. It's time to do some more digging. Next, I would check out the researchers who've cited this particular article. Typically, the article is cited because either the authors believe the conclusions offered and they're using the conclusions in their own research, or the article is cited because the authors don't agree and they're arguing the conclusions. What I would do in this case is to look up the article in Google Scholar and use the cited by search to see who is writing about the article and what they're saying. All right, well, that completes this lecture video. You now have all the tools you need to do some great searches for research articles. Thanks for watching, everyone.